Mr. Harrison, you need to come pick up your troublesome daughter. I forced each word through my teeth, a cold contempt washing over me. If she's still here in an hour, don't blame me for what happens. I didn't cry in that moment. I just stared silently at the clock, utterly convinced that it wasn't my wife, but her entire arrogant family who was about to be kicked out of this house. I had no idea that the masterpiece her father had been meticulously crafting for so long was about to reach its grand finale, and I was the punchline. If you want to know how one phone call completely destroyed my life and exposed the true face of a traitor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay until the very end, because the bitter lesson I'm about to share might be the most profound thing you hear today. My name is Jacob, and looking back on my life, my greatest mistake and most haunting shame is how I treated Amelia, the wife I cast aside with my own two hands. 5 years ago, I was the luckiest man in the world. Our wedding was the most talked about event in the city, not because of me, a mid-level sales director, but because she was Amelia, the only daughter of the powerful tycoon, Mr. Harrison. He was a titan in the business world, a man whose every word carried weight, and he had given me his most precious treasure. My father-in-law didn't hesitate to give us a life of luxury. The wedding gift wasn't a check or a trip, but the keys to a multi-million-dollar penthouse on Park Avenue. "This is your foundation," he said on that day, his voice warm and full of trust. "A home for you both to build your life upon." The deed was in both our names, a tangible confirmation of the happiness we were meant to share. My mother, Eleanor, couldn't hide her pride. Her son, from an ordinary family, had suddenly hit the jackpot. She treated Amelia like her own daughter, constantly praising her gentleness and virtue. For the next few years, my life was a dream. Amelia was the perfect wife. She gave up her own career to stay home, becoming a steadfast pillar of support for me. She took care of my every meal, my every need, and always supported my ambitions. Her love was pure and unconditional. I was a good husband too, or so I deluded myself into believing. I climbed the corporate ladder quickly, partly due to my abilities, but mostly thanks to the title of Harrison's son-in-law. Every door opened for me. We lived in that paradise, a paradise built on the wealth and power of her family. I got used to it, took it for granted. I forgot where I came from and what my true nature was. And then, one weekend evening, the first crack appeared. The family was having a cheerful dinner when Amelia received a call from her father. I still remember her radiant smile as she answered. "Dad, we're just having dinner." But that smile quickly vanished. It was replaced by a look of confusion, then horror. The phone slipped from her hand, hitting the marble floor with a sharp crack. "Amelia, what's wrong?" I asked with concern. She didn't answer, just shook her head as tears began to stream down her face. My mother also looked at her, bewildered. I quickly picked up the phone. The call was still connected. I put it to my ear, and that's when my world began to crumble. Mr. Harrison's voice on the other end was no longer the warm, authoritative voice I knew. It was weary, trembling, and filled with despair. "Jacob, the company, my company, is bankrupt. Everything. It's all gone." Bankrupt. The word was like a thunderclap. The Harrison Group, a real estate empire, how could it go bankrupt? I stammered, hoping it was some terrible joke. But it wasn't. He explained through heavy sighs about a ghost project, about people he had trusted wrongly, about massive bank debts. He would have to sell the houses, the properties, everything to pay it all off. When the call ended, I placed the phone on the table. I didn't go over to comfort Amelia. I just sat there, stiff as a statue. The way I looked at her had changed. It was no longer with love or affection. Instead, it was a cold calculation and a ruthless distance. My mother, after a moment of shock, quickly composed herself. She offered some empty words of comfort, but I could see the disappointment and anxiety in her eyes. That night, Amelia cried all night. She was worried about her parents, about our future. As for me, I couldn't sleep either, but not out of worry for her. I was worried for myself. The foundation upon which I had built my career and my life had collapsed. The burden would now fall on my shoulders. And in the darkness of that night, a dark, selfish thought began to sprout in my mind. The shock had planted the first seeds of suspicion and greed. I started to see my wife not as my partner, but as a potential liability tied to a fallen empire. My paradise was over. The very next morning, the mask of kindness and decency that my mother and I had worn for 5 years began to fall away. The change was as clear as an oil slick. The first to show her new attitude was my mother, Eleanor. The smile on her lips was replaced by a perpetual scowl and an expression of disgust. At breakfast, Amelia was too heartbroken to eat, only managing a few bites of toast. My mother didn't miss the chance to jab at her. "Well, well, looks like Miss Harrison has gotten picky with her food lately. What this house has to offer isn't to your liking anymore," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Of course, you're used to 5-star meals. Now that your parents are broke and you have no one to lean on, I guess life has lost its flavor." I was frozen. Every word was a dagger twisting in Amelia's wound. I just muttered under my breath, "Mum, what are you saying?" "Have I said anything untrue?" Eleanor snapped at me. "I'm just speaking the truth. You used to go on and on about your father-in-law this, your father-in-law that. Now that he's a bankrupt old man, let's see if you can still show off." Then, pursing her lips at Amelia, she continued, "Let me tell you something. This isn't a house you can just freeload in. Your husband works hard enough to support this family, and now it looks like he'll have to carry the weight of your family too. From now on, you better start acting like you belong. Stop wasting money on designer clothes. You'd better get used to being the daughter-in-law of a regular family." Amelia was stunned. Just the day before, my mother had praised her fashion sense. Now she was a burden. The daughter-in-law of a regular family. Unable to stand the tense atmosphere, I stood up abruptly. "I'm leaving for work." I didn't say a single word to defend her. Not one word of comfort. I simply chose to flee, leaving her alone to face my mother's cruelty. From that day on, Amelia's life in that house became a living hell. She was no longer Amelia or Honey. She was treated like a maid. My mother started ordering her to do all sorts of chores. "Amelia, clean the living room. It's so filthy I can't even look at it. Amelia, my laundry has been in the washing machine since this morning. Haven't you hung it up yet? Why is this soup so salty? Are you trying to kill me?" All the work previously done by the housekeeper was now her responsibility. I knew it, I saw it, but I remained silent. I told myself my mother was just worried about me, that she was under stress. I chose my own comfort over justice for my wife. That night, Amelia tried to talk to me. She waited for me in the living room. "Jacob, we need to talk." I was clearly trying to avoid her. "I'm really tired. Whatever it is, can we talk tomorrow?" "No, it has to be now," she said firmly. "Look at your mother's attitude lately. Don't you care how she's treating me?" I sighed heavily. "You know my mum's personality. She's probably just worried about me, worried that I'm struggling. Besides, with what happened to your family, it's understandable she's on edge. Just have a little patience. You're her daughter-in-law. Is it that hard to humor her a bit?" "Patience?" I saw the disbelief in her eyes. "You want me to endure these insults? I'm your wife, not the maid in this house." "Enough!" I shouted, perhaps from the stress of work or because I felt cornered. "Please don't make things worse." I have enough problems already. What do you want me to do? Fight with my own mother and tear this family apart? If you won't think about me, at least think about our home." With that, I stormed out again, leaving her alone with her anger and sorrow. I realized then that I would never take her side. Between my mother and her, I had chosen my mother. Or, more accurately, I had chosen myself and my own comfort. The days passed in a haze of humiliation and loneliness. Amelia grew noticeably thinner, her face perpetually grim. She thought about divorce, but she couldn't. She still loved me, still clung to the faint hope that this was just a temporary hardship. But when this all passed, I would go back to being the husband she loved. She had no idea that while she was clinging to patience and false hope, my mother and I were plotting something far more cruel. A plan to snatch away the last and greatest asset she had left. About a week after the catastrophe of Amelia's family, one evening after another tense dinner, I suddenly called her into my study. My demeanor that day was strange. Instead of my usual coldness and disdain, I was surprisingly gentle and considerate. "Amelia, come sit here," I said, patting the chair beside me. A little startled, she sat down cautiously. I poured her a glass of water and took her hand. "I know how hard it's been for you lately. I'm sorry. I was a fool for not comforting you. But don't worry. I've been thinking a lot. And no matter how difficult things get, I will never abandon you or your family." After so much coldness, my sweet words softened her wounded heart without her realizing it. The flame of hope flickered back to life. Maybe he really has seen the error of his ways, I knew she was thinking. "Look," I continued in a sincere voice. "For the past few days, I've been meeting with partners and friends to find a way to help your father. But the debt is so large that a little help from my friends wouldn't be enough." I sighed deeply, my face etched with concern. "But I've thought of a solution. It might be a bit risky, but right now it's the only way for your father to get back on his feet. Our home, this penthouse, it's in both our names. I've been looking into it, and with the equity in this property, we can secure a very large home equity loan from the bank. We could get several $1,000,000. With that capital, your father could start over. He could rebuild his business." I saw her freeze. Mortgaging this house. It was our biggest asset, our home. As if reading her hesitation, I squeezed her hand tighter. "I know what you're worried about. I know this was a wedding gift from your father, but think about the situation we're in. Your father is in dire straits. How can we as his children just stand by and watch? Money can be lost and earned again, but family is priceless." My words were noble and righteous. I targeted her weakest point, her filial love and devotion to her parents. "Don't worry," I continued, reassuring her. "I've done all the calculations. We'll only take out a partial loan, just enough to give your father the capital he needs. With his ability and experience, he'll be able to pay back the principal and interest to the bank in a year or two. Our home will be safe. I'm doing this because I want to help you, because I want to ease your burden." I looked at her with such sincerity, the look of a husband willing to give everything for his wife's family, that I almost believed my own lies. And I, a master con artist, completely won her over. Amelia, desperate with worry for her father, was completely convinced. She believed me. She thought I had finally come to my senses and returned to being the husband she loved. "So, what do I need to do?" she asked. "I've already prepared all the paperwork," I said with a joyful expression. "Since you're a co-owner, the bank needs signatures from both of us. You'll also need to sign a power of attorney so I can handle all the banking procedures. Tomorrow, you just need to take a moment to sign right here." I pulled a thick stack of documents from my briefcase and placed it on the desk. Holding that thick pile of documents, Amelia's mind was a whirlwind. On one hand, She was incredibly moved and grateful. On the other, perhaps a tiny flicker of doubt remained. But my gesture seemed to erase all the bitterness and humiliation she had endured. "What's wrong? Haven't you signed yet?" My voice pulled her from her thoughts. I looked at her with a flicker of impatience, but quickly concealed it with a warm smile. "Is there something you're worried about? Just trust me. I would never do anything to hurt you." "Oh, no, it's not that," she said, feeling guilty for ever doubting me. "It's just there are so many papers. I don't understand much about these procedures." She started flipping through the pages. They were filled with dense legal jargon and numbers. Loan applications, repayment plans, mortgage agreements, power of attorney documents. Everything looked very reasonable, just as I had explained. "You don't need to read through all of it so meticulously," I said, in a tone that seemed urgent. "These are all standard bank forms. They can't be changed. You just need to sign where I've marked. I have to submit them first thing in the morning. The appraiser is coming this afternoon. We need to move quickly so your father can get the money." I brought her father into it again. My haste, in her eyes, became a zeal to help her family. With that thought, the last shred of doubt in her mind vanished. I had succeeded. "Yes, okay, I'm sorry," she said, genuinely apologetic. She took the pen. I had carefully marked the signature lines with yellow sticky notes. She no longer read the text carefully. She just flipped to the marked pages and signed her name. Her signature was clear and firm. She had signed, placing all her faith and hope in me. She had no idea. Hidden among those innocuous papers was one fatal sheet, waiting for her signature. It was a quitclaim deed. I had cleverly sandwiched it between the mortgage papers. She didn't see it. She signed her name to it, a signature that would seal her fate, turning her from the owner of this house into a destitute outcast. As soon as Amelia finished signing, I hastily gathered the documents and checked the signatures one more time. My face was beaming with joy. At that moment, she naively thought I was happy because I could help her family. "Done," I said, pulling her into a tight hug. "Don't worry, everything will be fine. I promise your parents won't have to suffer any more." She hugged me back, shedding tears of emotion. At that moment, I knew she believed she had her old husband back. She believed that even if her family crumbled, she had the strongest pillar in me. She didn't know she was living in a false happiness. She naively believed the storm had truly passed. She didn't realize that this was just the executioner's final kindness before the axe fell. The calm before a storm that would devastate everything. And that storm arrived on a weekend afternoon. That evening, I had asked her to prepare a lavish dinner with all of my favorite dishes. I said I wanted to thank her for trusting me. When I came home from work, she ran happily to greet me, but what she received wasn't my usual warm smile. My face was as cold as ice, and the look I gave her was strange and contemptuous. "Jacob, what's wrong?" she asked, concerned. I didn't answer. I walked right past her and went straight to the living room. There, my mother, Eleanor, was already sitting, waiting for me with an impassive expression. "Sit down," I said in a dry voice. "We need to talk." I saw a bad feeling rise in her. Her heart started pounding. She cautiously sat on the opposite sofa. I didn't beat around the bush. I pulled a folder from my briefcase and tossed it onto the coffee table with a thud. "Sign it." With trembling hands, she picked up the papers. The moment the two words, "divorce petition," printed in bold, jumped out at her, I watched her whole world explode. She was frozen. Her ears were ringing. "Divorce? Why divorce, Jacob? You're kidding, right?" she stammered, unable to believe her eyes. "Why? Why so suddenly? What?"
What did I do wrong?
I laughed. A laugh that in hindsight was incredibly fake and terrifying. You didn't do anything wrong. I just don't love you anymore. Our lives are too different. I can't keep living with a woman who's dragging the weight of a family like yours behind her. The weight of a family. Just a week ago, I'd promised we would bear it together. Tears started to well up. No, this can't be. There must be a misunderstanding. Jacob, look at me. It's me, Amelia. But I didn't look at her. I stared coldly at the papers. Sign it. Don't waste my time. It was then that my mother spoke. Her voice was no longer gentle, but laced with contempt. Still don't get it after everything he's told you, she said scornfully. Look at yourself. Your parents are broke. You're not a rich kid anymore. Do you think my son is stupid enough to keep carrying a burden like you? The only reason he stayed with you these past few years was because of your family. Now that your family is finished, so is your relationship. It's that simple. Every word was a knife, stabbing into her bleeding heart. So that was it. All the love I had professed was a calculation. I was only by her side because of her title as a CEO's daughter. And now that the title was gone, I intended to discard her like a useless object. Scum! She screamed. You are human trash! Who are you calling trash? My mother screeched back. You should be grateful my son put up with you for the last 5 years. Just sign the papers and get out of my sight. Amelia looked at me with pleading eyes. Jacob, please don't do this to me. We can work through anything together, but not divorce. Please. But the man she had loved with all her heart replied coldly. It's too late, Amelia. My feelings for you died the day I found out your family was ruined. Either you sign, or I'll see you in court. My words were like a hammer blow, shattering her last hope, her last illusion. She collapsed onto the floor, clutching the divorce papers and sobbing uncontrollably. She had been deceived in the most cruel and absolute way. But in the midst of that extreme pain, a cold rage began to boil inside her. She wiped her tears and shot to her feet. She grabbed the pen and signed her name on the divorce petition, a signature without hesitation. Signed. Fine. Let's get a divorce. She continued in a firm voice. This house was a gift from my father. Even if we divorce, I'm not going anywhere. This is still my house. Hearing her words, my mother and I looked at each other and burst out laughing, a laugh full of contempt and pity. Your house, I said, laughing until I had tears in my eyes. Amelia, you're so naive. It's pathetic. Do you really think any part of this house will be left for you after the divorce? I walked over, pulled another folder from my briefcase, and threw it in front of her. See for yourself whose signature this is. With trembling hands, she picked up the document and felt the world collapse once more. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring her interest in the property. And below was her signature, clear as day. It was then that she realized the stack of papers she had signed, the trap she had walked into with her own 2 hands. You tricked me! She screamed, lunging at me like a wild animal. But I easily pushed her away, and she fell clumsily to the floor. Tricked you? More like you were too stupid, I said, looking down at me with the eyes of a victor. Who can you blame now? After signing a document with your own hand, gifting your share of the house to your husband, this house is now mine alone. You don't get a single cent. She collapsed onto the floor, completely broken. She had lost everything. Her husband, her faith, and now even her home. In the days that followed, Amelia stubbornly stayed, turning her bedroom into a fortress. She refused to leave, and her defiant attitude enraged my mother and me. My patience had run out. I was done playing games. "Amelia! Get out here right now!" I pounded on her door. There was no answer. "You're not coming out? You want me to break down the door?" I knew with my temper I was perfectly capable of it. After a moment, she took a deep breath and opened the door. I stood there with my arms crossed, looking down at her arrogantly. "Still haven't left? You're really going to stay here so shamelessly? Let me tell you something, Amelia. Your bankrupt family is no match for us. You'd better leave quietly. Don't make me hurt you." She just stared at me in silence. Her silence seemed to enrage me further. "Fine, you asked for it." I pulled out my smartphone and dialed a number I knew she would never forget. Her father's number. "Hello, am I speaking to my father-in-law?" I said into the phone. My tone was full of contempt and defiance. I deliberately put it on speakerphone so that both she and my mother, who was standing nearby, could hear. "It's Jacob. I'm calling with some good news. Your darling daughter. As of today, she's no longer my wife. We just got divorced." There was silence on the other end. I could imagine Mr. Harrison's shock and pain. Amelia's heart clenched, but I didn't stop. I laughed cruelly. "Oh, but I'm not just calling to share the news. Sorry to bother you, but could you come and pick up your troublesome daughter? She's holed up in my house and has no intention of leaving. Says she'd rather die here. What a great upbringing you gave her. Even taught her how to be a freeloader in someone else's house." Crash! I heard something break on the other end. It was probably the teacup her father always held. "What did you just say?" Mr. Harrison's voice trembled with rage. "I said, come and get her!" I roared like a wild animal. "My house isn't a charity for the daughter of a washed-up old man like you. I'll give you 1 hour. If she's still here in an hour, don't blame me if I have someone drag her out onto the street. Goodbye." I hung up and threw the phone on the table. I turned to Amelia with a triumphant smile. She stood there, tears streaming down her face, but this time they weren't tears of helplessness. They were tears of profound rage. I had not only insulted her, but her parents, the people she loved most in this world. I had crossed her final line. In her despair, she trembling dialed her father back. "Dad, it's me." Her voice broke. On the other end, Mr. Harrison's voice was impossibly calm. "Amelia, don't cry. Dad knows everything. I recorded everything that scoundrel said. My girl, you've suffered a lot. You did very well. You were very brave." His voice was no longer that of a bankrupt man, but full of authority. "Now listen to me carefully. Don't go anywhere. Stay in that house. Lock your bedroom door. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Trust your father." That was all he said. 3 words, but they carried the weight of a ton. All of Amelia's confusion vanished, replaced by an absolute faith. My mother and I, seeing her stunned expression after the call, gloated even more. "What, you tattled to your daddy?" I mocked. "Let's see what that broke old man can do when he gets here. Is he going to come and kneel to apologize for his daughter?" My mother leisurely went to the kitchen to make tea, saying she would enjoy the show. We were enjoying our last moments of arrogance, unaware that a giant tsunami was about to crash down and wash away all our hubris and dirty schemes. Exactly 30 minutes later, I started to hear a distant rumble. The roar of car engines grew louder and louder until it stopped right in front of our building. My mother and I curiously walked out to the balcony, and the smiles on our faces froze. On the street below wasn't an old taxi, but a motorcade. Leading the way was a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom, followed by 2 black Mercedes S-Class sedans and a large black Escalade. The door of the Rolls-Royce opened, and a man in a black suit got out. It was Alonzo, Mr. Harrison's most trusted head of security. He walked around the car and politely opened the rear door. And then, my father-in-law stepped out. He was wearing a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, and on his wrist gleamed a limited edition Patek Philippe watch. He looked nothing like a ruined man. He was majestic and imposing, like an emperor returning to his kingdom. From the other cars emerged his family's lawyer, Mr. Jennings, and nearly a dozen tall bodyguards in black uniforms. My mother and I stood on the balcony, speechless. Our faces shifted from arrogance to confusion, and then to extreme panic. We weren't fools. We were beginning to realize we had walked into a trap. The security team quickly fanned out, securing the area. My father-in-law and Mr. Jennings walked calmly into the building. I rushed down the stairs. By the time I got there, they had just entered the living room. Mr. Harrison, I stammered, my voice no longer arrogant but filled with terror. How did you get here? Your company... My father-in-law turned to face us. His gentle expression vanished, replaced by a gaze as cold and sharp as a razor, a look that seemed to pierce right through our souls. My company, he sneered, a laugh full of sarcasm. Thank you for your concern. It's doing very well. In fact, we just closed a massive deal in Dubai this morning. What? What are you saying? My mother shrieked, disbelieving. Impossible! You're lying! You're bankrupt! You said so yourself! Yes, I said so myself, my father-in-law admitted calmly. But it wasn't bad news. It was a test to see the true nature of people. A test? My mother and I were horrified. Mr. Harrison didn't bother to reply, simply sitting down calmly on the sofa, where I had been sitting arrogantly just minutes before. His lawyer, Mr. Jennings, wasted no time. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Mr. Jacob, Mrs. Eleanor, Mr. Jennings said, his voice polite but emotionless. I believe it's time you learned the whole truth. He placed a contract on the table. This is the original property agreement drafted on the wedding day of Mr. Jacob and Miss Amelia. Mr. Harrison, as the bride's father, gifted this penthouse as a shared marital asset. However, I would ask you to please read the final clause carefully. Article 9, Section 3. My mother and I hurriedly leaned forward, squinting to read the very small font at the bottom of the last page. Our confident faces turned from red to white, then to a pale blue. Mr. Jennings read it aloud, his voice as clear as a judge delivering a sentence. Special Provision 9.3. The property in question is hereby placed into a revocable trust, the Miller-Harrison Residence Trust, for the sole benefit of the married couple. In the event the marital relationship is terminated for any reason, including divorce, this trust shall automatically dissolve. Any subsequent transfer, gift, sale, mortgage on said property without the express written and notarized consent of the original grantor, Mr. Richard Harrison, shall be considered null and void. The property will automatically revert to the full ownership of the Harrison Group LLC. Null and void, my mother stammered, her voice breaking. She swayed and had to grab my arm to keep from falling. That's right, man, Mr. Jennings said, his voice like ice. To put it simply, that quitclaim deed that Mr. Jacob holds, the one you treasure so much, became legally worthless the moment he and Miss Amelia were officially divorced. It's just a piece of paper now. No, impossible! I screamed, completely losing my composure. This is a trap! You set us up! A trap? My father-in-law finally spoke, his voice deep and authoritative. Jacob, I once trusted you. I thought you were an ambitious, talented young man, and most importantly, that you sincerely loved my daughter. I didn't hesitate to give you my most precious child, to give you a fortune to build your lives on. This bankruptcy charade was my final test for you. I wanted to see your true nature when my daughter was no longer a rich man's child, when her family collapsed. I wanted to see if you would stand by her side and overcome hardship together, or... He didn't finish the sentence, but we all understood. I gave you a chance. His voice became firm. A chance to prove yourself as a man, as a husband, but you have disappointed me profoundly. You not only showed your greed and treachery, but you abandoned your wife in her moment of greatest pain, and even cooked up a vile scheme with your mother to steal her last asset. It was then that I realized what I had lost. Not just a penthouse, but an immense fortune, a giant business, and a brilliant future. I had thrown it all away for my own greed and short-sightedness. I dropped to my knees before him. "Sir, Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," I sobbed, tears of belated regret. I was possessed. Greed blinded me. Please forgive me just this once." My mother also scrambled to kneel beside me, wailing and begging. But this tearful performance had no effect. "Forgiveness," Mr. Harrison said coldly. "If the person who came here today wasn't me, but a truly bankrupt old man, would you be saying these words? Or would you have insulted that old man to his face and thrown his daughter onto the street without mercy?" Mr. Jennings opened his briefcase again, but this time he took out a tablet. He played a video and turned the screen toward us. On the screen was footage from a hidden camera in the private room of a high-end restaurant, and the star of the video was none other than me. I was talking to an unknown man, my voice crystal clear. "Don't worry. If you handle the matter in court properly, I'll sell the penthouse immediately. We'll split the proceeds as we agreed, 60-40. The video ended, and the room was deathly silent. It turned out I had not only deceived my wife, but had also dared to collude with a court official, trying to buy justice with money. How did you get this?" I stammered. "You thought I didn't have the same connections as you," my father-in-law said, his voice glacial. "The man you met with was a trap I set myself. I just wanted to see how low you would go." The extreme shock caused me to completely break down. There was no escape. "Your actions," Mr. Jennings said, his voice firm, as if reading an indictment, "not only constitute fraud and misappropriation, but there is also evidence of the felony crime of bribery. With this video, how many years in prison do you think you're looking at, Mr. Jacob?" The fear of prison completely took over my mind. My mother, after the terrible shock, no longer dared to scream. She staggered over and knelt before Mr. Harrison, all her pride and arrogance gone, leaving only the misery of someone begging for mercy. "Mr. Harrison, please, I'm begging you. It's all my fault." My father-in-law looked at her coldly. "Mercy, Mrs. Eleanor. When your son deceived my daughter, did you think of that word?" It was not a choice. It was an ultimatum. Sign an affidavit waiving all rights to appeal, acknowledging the penthouse as Harrison Group property, and pledging to never appear in Amelia's life again, and in return, they would not press criminal charges. My mother and I, trembling, signed our names. Immediately after, a dozen bodyguards entered. At Mr. Harrison's command, they gave us 1 hour to pack only our essential personal belongings. Our clothes and shoes were pulled out and thrown into cardboard boxes like trash. Exactly 1 hour later, my mother and I, each carrying a few boxes, miserably walked out the grand doors, under the curious stares and whispers of the neighbors. The heavy iron gate slowly closed behind us, bringing an end to the darkest chapter of my life. After that day, I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my future. No company would hire a man who had tried to scam his own in-laws. My mother fell ill from the shock, and we had to move back to our hometown to live amidst the scorn of our relatives and neighbors. As for Amelia, I heard she returned to her passion for architecture, starting her own design studio focusing on social impact projects. A few years later, she remarried an old college friend, a man who didn't have wealth, but had a sincere heart. My story is a bitter lesson, a lesson paid for at an exorbitant price. I had everything in my hands, a wife who loved me unconditionally, in-laws who supported me wholeheartedly, and the brilliant future that millions dream of. But I threw it all away. I discarded a gold mine for a lump of coal. Greed turned me into a monster, and short-sightedness turned me into a fool. I failed to understand that the greatest value isn't in quantifiable assets, but in gratitude and appreciation for what you have. When you have someone willing to stand by you in your darkest hour, that is the most priceless asset of all. The message I want to send to everyone is this: never let greed cloud your reason and your humanity. True love and trust are incredibly fragile. Once shattered, they can never be truly mended. Cherish the people who genuinely love you, because when you lose them, you lose the best part of yourself. Betrayal doesn't just steal material things. It leaves a guilty conscience and a loneliness that will haunt you for the rest of your life. I want to ask you, who are listening to this story, do you think a person like me deserves forgiveness? And in your life, have you ever faced a test of loyalty and character like I did? Please share your thoughts in the comments below.